Okay, we are now recording. So today's presentation is 5 easy ways to be more accessible. My name is Lauryn Woodman, and I am an instructional designer with Online Learning. If you haven't attended any of my presentations in the past, I'm very laid back and open, so feel free to type any questions in the chat and I'll answer them as we go, or I'll let you know if I'll address it at the end. I just ask that you mute yourself if you're not speaking, but you can feel free to unmute and interrupt if you have a question or if you have something to add. As I mentioned before, we are offering a certificate or a badge for completion of this training, and this training does count towards the accessibility certificate. So stay tuned for the end of the training and you'll receive a QR code or link to claim your badge. Before we dive in, I'm just going to go over briefly what we'll discuss today. So we'll talk about some definitions to make sure we're all on the same page. We'll talk about planning in advance. So as you're finding materials, making sure they're accessible and knowing where you're going in your course. We'll talk about offering alternative means to access information. We'll talk about flexibility, including flexibility in how students complete and turn in assignments, as well as being flexible with student needs. We'll also talk about clarity and consistency. So that's consistency in expectations, in deadlines, in writing clear instructions. And we'll go over navigation and organization. So how to have a well-organized course so that students can find materials. I do want to let you know that this training isn't really tool specific. It's more to help you get in the mindset of accessibility. So does that sound good?
Yes.
Awesome. Yes, I see thumbs up. You can use your reactions. You can unmute yourself. I want this to feel as interactive as possible. So we're going to start with definitions. So what is accessibility anyway? And Sandra asked this great question at the beginning. So accessibility is shaped by what we need to do, our interactions with the environment, and our personal preferences. Educational materials and technologies are accessible to people with disabilities if they are able to acquire the same information, engage in the same interactions, and enjoy the same services as people who don't have disabilities. As a person with a disability, you have to be able to achieve these 3 goals in an equally integrated and equally effective manner with substantially equivalent ease of use. And if that sounds like legalese, that's because that is from the US Department of Justice and the US Department of Education. I'm sure Robin's like, that sounds familiar. And that is kind of the definition of accessibility for disability. But as we start to talk about these different ways to be accessible, you'll realize that there are other types of accessibility, or you can think about it as accessibility for everyone. So just because someone doesn't have a diagnosed or a recognized disability doesn't mean that they don't also need flexibility in the types of materials they have and in the way that the course is delivered to them. So the first easy way to be accessible is to plan for accessibility and to plan in advance. When planning materials for your course, try to make sure that they're already accessible. So find book chapters that aren't scanned, that are web accessible text. We all have seen those horrible pixelated old photocopies that are like a picture of a picture of a picture, and it's hard for anyone to read. Well, screen readers can't read those. Students who have any kind of visual impairment can't read those. So it's important to have content in your course that's already accessible so that you don't have to potentially fix it later. If you're looking for videos, YouTube is really popular and it's a great way to find content for your course. Make sure that those videos that you're finding already have captions. If you search on YouTube, you can check to see if a video has captions. And I can show you here how to do that. You'll just click the closed caption button. This is a close-up of the YouTube video with captions on. If there are captions, the CC button will appear. You click on that button and then captions should show on the video. Just because the video has captions doesn't mean that they are complete or accurate. Accurate captions will usually have speaker names and punctuation in addition to being complete and correct. So I recommend watching through the video to see if the captions are adequate. And I see Sandra has a question.
Yes, I was wondering, when I copied my Blackboard course over to a new semester, my videos and my pictures did not copy over. I'm just noticing now that none of it went over. I mean, the writing part went over, but none of the visuals. And so is that a problem with accessibility?
Well, yes, but not in the way you're thinking. I mean, none of your students will be able to access that. We can definitely talk online and see what might have happened in the course copy process that could have caused that. Something else that's really common is that videos are removed from YouTube all the time or changed from YouTube. I know Robin ran into that as well. And unfortunately, if you get a message that says this video is no longer available, that means that whoever owns it has taken it off of YouTube, and there really isn't anything that we can do at that point to get it back. But we can look at that, Sandra. If you want to send me an email, I can take a look at the course and see if we can get that back.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. All right, so we talked about finding videos that already have captions in YouTube. And there are some channels that are almost always captioned. So Khan Academy, Crash Course, TED Talks, those are almost always going to be captioned, and TED Talks especially are usually transcribed into a bunch of different languages. So that's a great resource as well. And if you routinely post PowerPoint presentations, try to use or try to adapt publisher PowerPoints if you have those from the publisher, because publishers are required to make their PowerPoints fully accessible. So even if you don't like the way that the publisher maybe says certain things, or you don't like the boringness of their PowerPoints, it's a great starting place because you know that what's there is already accessible and you just have to build off of that. If you want to build out your own PowerPoint presentations, we do have a session that's recorded that is on that course site that I showed you about how to make accessible PowerPoints, and we will be offering that presentation later this semester as well. So when I talk about planning, I always try to use a picture of an airplane because there's this great saying in instructional design that you don't want to be building the airplane while you're flying it. And likewise, you don't want to be coming up with ideas for how you're going to run your course mid-semester. So know where you're going in your course. Don't build the airplane while you're flying it. Have a plan in advance, and that will allow you to find accessible materials and maintain good organization without trying to scramble at the last minute. If you're using Blackboard, which all of us are, then know where you're going to put things in your course. So, have a place where you put videos, or have a standard structure so that if you have to add a reading or you have to add a video, you know where that's going to go. So how do you plan? If you're new to teaching, or if you traditionally teach a course that's been created for you, which I know none of you are, but just saying in general, how to plan a course might not be intuitive. So if you're building your course from the bottom up, you'll start by looking at the course outcomes and concepts. So what's the content you want students to learn? What materials are they going to need? Is it textbooks? Is it websites? Is there any interactive media out there? Are there innovative ways that they can learn the content? What activities are they going to do to contribute to meeting those objectives? And how will you assess that they've learned the content and met the objectives? So this is an example of an online course map template. This is linked at the end of the presentation. I don't expect you to absorb all of the information. This is just an example. So you can see it has space for the course name, the instructor name, the semester, the course outcomes, and those you can always find on the SharePoint site. Those come from the course outline. And any textbook or publisher materials or supplemental resources that you plan to use. And this follows a table type structure. And you'll see the first column of the table has you enter in either the module, the class, or the topic. And then that might be like week 1, chapter 1, World War I. And then you would list out the course outcomes and then the unit outcomes that relate to it. And the course and the unit outcomes would be for that specific week. So what are your learning outcomes for that week? And how do they relate to your course outcomes? In the next column of the table, you'd enter the content and activities that you want your students to do. So if they're going to maybe read the chapter, watch a PowerPoint, watch a video, go to a website, you enter it into that column. The next column is the assessments that you're going to use, and that can include any rubrics that you have for certain assignments, especially if they're written assignments that, maybe your semester papers or projects. So an idea of what kind of feedback students are going to get. And then the last column, you just have space for notes. This next slide is an alignment map, and I'm not going to go into this in depth. I know you can't even really see it, but this can help with that last column on the previous slide about learning outcomes and how you can align your unit level outcomes to your course level outcomes. This is just to help you write really effective learning objectives. You put in your module objective and you would say, what level of Bloom's is that? And Bloom's is a taxonomy method for categorizing learning outcomes. And then you would say how that aligns to the course learning outcome. And that alignment map also has the same space for materials and activities and assessments. So very similar to the other one, and just helps you break down the outcomes part of the equation. And like I said, these are linked at the end of the presentation, which you will get a copy of. Moving on to our next way to be accessible is to offer alternatives. So online courses are notoriously text heavy. Usually your instructions are written. Students are going to read their textbook. They're going to read maybe a notes guide or a PowerPoint. They review information on websites, read articles, and then they're usually writing and reading each other's discussion board posts. So try to offer students different ways to access that information. In addition to reading about classical conditioning, see if there's a YouTube video or maybe create one that also explains the concept. Make a weekly video or audio introduction and checklist for your students to go along with that text written version. And even if the media that you're using is only available in written format, think about different types of written content. So there's that textbook and journal articles that might be very formal reading, but are there more popular culture news articles or links to different websites that say the information in a different way that's a little bit more accessible for students? Do you have any questions before I move on to flexibility? Okay. So flexibility. There are a few different aspects to flexibility that I want to discuss. The first is flexibility for submitting assignments. Since online courses are so text heavy, try to incorporate more interactive options for students who might struggle with the written medium. Try using Flipgrid instead of traditional written discussion boards. You could try offering different options for student assessments, like allowing students to turn in a paper or a project, or maybe create a video or a podcast or make a website. So giving them all of these different options for maybe that same assessment, just a different type of assessment. Next, I want to discuss how you can be flexible with student needs. So like we talked about earlier, maybe there's a student who doesn't have a disability or hasn't disclosed that they have a disability or a certain need. Are there things that you can do to make the course more accessible to all students? For example, posting lecture notes, study guides, and recordings of your lectures benefits all students, but it might especially benefit students who need more time to review the materials or who miss class due to personal or medical issues. Consider potential barriers for students to turn in work on a certain day or by a certain time. For example, if you have your exam periods as a very short period of time, it can be an equity issue for students who don't have their own computer or maybe are working full time or taking care of children. And sporadic due dates or due dates that aren't very consistent can leave those with busy schedules or executive functioning issues scrambling to figure out when they're supposed to submit work. Lastly, consider the demands of attendance policies for students who are sick or dealing with a disability or other medical or personal issue. And I know that there's institutional rules and guidance about attendance, so that might be something that strategically we have to look at as an institution. but in this new normal post-COVID, thinking about attendance differently is something that could be really helpful to all students. So what are some creative ways that we could use to determine attendance instead of physically you're sitting in front of me in class? Well, data and reporting. So Blackboard and Echo 360 both provide information about when students log in and access information. For instructors posting notes and lectures in Blackboard, this information could be used to say, okay, you couldn't make it to class today, but you access the lecture notes or video, so that counts as attendance. Creative solutions like this are more inclusive and provide a more accessible classroom experience for all students. Any questions? Okay. We're going to move on to clarity and consistency. One of the best ways you can help students be clear, one of the best ways you can help students is to be clear about your expectations. So we talk about netiquette and behavior, right? What are your expectations of students? How are they expected to communicate with you and with each other? What kind of language is appropriate? And this might vary depending on the type of course or instructor. So it's important to spell that out for students and tell them what your expectations are. Due dates. So when is work due? Is it always due on the same day? If there's a big project, are you telling them in advance? I find it's really helpful to post announcements and put reminders into those weekly folders for upcoming assignments, even if it's in the syllabus. We know students can miss it because we know that they're not looking at the syllabus, right? You can also use the built-in due date feature in Blackboard to automate some of this. So if you check the due date in Blackboard, students will see it on their calendar. If they use the app, they'll see that they have an upcoming assignment. So that kind of helps remind them as well. Contact times and methods. When can students expect to hear back from you? This is huge. We get messages all the time from students saying, my instructor didn't respond. And we say, well, when did you email them? And it was, an hour ago. So make sure that students know, what the expected time is for you to get back to them. And then make sure that you stick to that. When will work be graded? This is another one. Students always want to know how they're doing. So make sure that grade book is updated and that they know when they can expect to get work back. And then how do they get in touch with you and when? Whether it's email, a phone number, text, let students know the best way to contact you so that they can always get in touch. Project instructions. So I see a lot of instructors put information into their course about a project, and maybe it's just a rubric, or maybe the information's in the syllabus, right? But it's not with that project link in the course. This is really important to explicitly spell out in your course, especially if your course is maybe usually discussion boards or quizzes, and then boom, all of a sudden there's a project. If it's unlike anything students have done before, they might not even know where to begin. So that's where a rubric can really come in handy too, to really break down for them those expectations. Checklists and course instructions. So this is a point I am maybe most passionate about, which is just tell your students what you want them to do. There's no need to be cryptic. So it might seem like to you that putting a bunch of links into Blackboard is enough. It's not. I've seen instructors say, do everything in this folder. And then there's like 10 links and a bunch of uploaded files. And it's like, well, what are they supposed to do with that? So having a clear checklist for students is really important. And it should be fairly consistent week to week, except any of those, special projects or exams. So an example might be, week 1, read chapter 1, watch the video, read the New York Times article, post to the discussion board, respond to 2 posts, take the quiz. And this carries over to assignments as well. So make sure to write really clear, thorough, and effective instructions. Anticipate the confusion and the questions and those muddy points, right? If you've been teaching long enough, you get the same questions about every single assignment, and use those as an FAQ kind of sheet. Say, these are common questions. Read this before you email me. So speaking of writing clear and effective instructions, this is a quote I found that I thought you'd all really enjoy. I know I enjoyed it. It says, "So be kind. Design online and off for people who, usually through no fault of their own, cannot engage with complexity. Use shorter, familiar words and shorter sentences. Give users as few choices as possible, presented one by one. If there's a way to engineer things so that users don't have to enter a lot of information themselves, choose that. Do the hard work to make it simple." And that's really what we're talking about here today, right? Is how do you set it up? And it might be a lot of work on the front end, but how do you set it up so that for students, it's simple? Any questions before I move on to navigation and organization, which I think is our last point? Okay. So navigation and organization. This is probably one of the most important aspects of accessibility. Make sure your course has clear and intuitive navigation. One way to do this is to keep the base navigation in Blackboard whenever possible. That way it's the same for students from course to course, so they know what to expect. Avoid renaming course links unless it's clearly explained or for more clarity. So for example, I've seen people rename Blackboard Collaborate Ultra to Class Meeting Room. And that makes sense, right? Because students would think to click there to go into their course. Avoid creating or having duplicate menu links and check for your duplicates after a course copy. Duplicated links are very confusing to students. Even if they go to the same place, it usually just trips them up. Avoid creating new course links unless they add to part of the curriculum for students. So usually any additional supplemental folders you have can go right into the learning content. And make sure your course content is organized in a way that makes sense for your field. So that might be by chapter, by week, by unit, by module, by topic, but keep all of the topical content in one place and try to mark those folders with the dates so that students know where to go for their content and when. Avoid having assignments or course materials for the same week across multiple folders. One anecdote I'll share is that I work with a lot of the students who either have disabilities, might have a visual impairment, or might be deaf or hard of hearing. And students who use screen readers find it really, really difficult to go in and out of folders. So if you have a folder with your PowerPoints and then a folder with your class links and then a folder with quizzes, that's really difficult for a student using a screen reader to go back and forth to get all of that content. So I know that might be common practice. I see a lot of people who will keep PowerPoints in one folder, assignments in another folder. Imagine, if you're having to go back and forth, you have to go into 3 or 4 different areas just to gather all of the work you need to do for that week. So I've seen it firsthand, and it is such an unnecessary strain on the student. It kind of goes with what I said earlier, which is there's no need to be cryptic. Put all their work for that week in one place. It's an accessible design that benefits everyone, and it makes it easier for you as well if you were editing your course or trying to find materials. So these are just examples. So you can see the left-hand menu, the base navigation of Blackboard, with the addition of one folder that's called the final project folder. And this is college success, if you were wondering. In the learning content, we have a folder for this topic. We have, this topic is college culture and effective communication. You see there's learning objectives, there's a checklist. Students do a Flipgrid for the week. On this next slide, we see, okay, there's a link to their module, a link to a discussion, and then an assignment for students to complete. So each activity is clearly labeled and marked, and it's included in that checklist that we have here for students. So I was going to do this in breakout groups, but we're a small enough group here that we can just take a moment and discuss as a group some things that you could do to be more accessible. You can either deep dive on something I covered or consider an idea of your own, and then discuss how you might want to implement this idea in your course. So I will give it about 5 to 10 minutes, I'm going to stop talking, and then I'd like you all to chime in with any thoughts that you have.
Hi, Lauren. Sandra again. Are you ready?
Yes.
Okay. I didn't know whether you wanted us to start yet or not, but anyway.
Yes.
I was attracted to this workshop because it had something in the title about being more accessible to students. And I was hoping that you would discuss more thoroughly different ways that we can be there for students, and either using Blackboard or not. But like, are there tools that in Blackboard that students can use, even if not to be more accessible to the instructor, but to be more accessible to each other? And so I was wondering if you can address that curiosity of mine.
Sure, Sandra, that's actually a great question. Thank you for bringing that up. There are some tools built into Blackboard to facilitate communication. I would say the two that kind of make the most sense are announcements, which I know you already use, and discussion boards, which I also know that you already use. That being said, announcements are kind of one way that's, you disseminating information. It's not really communicative. And discussion boards have varying degrees of success in online and face-to-face classes with students actually engaging. So I mentioned briefly Flipgrid, which is not built into Blackboard, but is a free tool that I find students really, students usually have feelings about, it's recording. So it's a video discussion board for those who don't know. But it can be a great way to foster community, especially in an online class or a hybrid class where you don't really know what people look like or you're not seeing them all the time. That kind of helps build a little bit more community. And especially when instructors create videos, so the students see you, they're responding to you by video, it kind of breaks down that barrier and it makes it a little bit easier to communicate. As far as ways for you to be more accessible to students or to make it easier for students to access you, it's really going to depend on how you want to interact. So I'm a big fan of using Google Voice. You can use phone and text with that. You don't have to give away your own personal cell phone number. Google Voice is really nice because you can set times. So like you can set do not disturb times automatically to say, okay, this line's only open from 9 to 5. But for students who maybe don't want to call and want to text you instead, but it's not, a formal email, that's a really great option if that's something you're open to. And some instructors use Remind, which is another app that allows for texting, between instructors and students. Does that help?
I was trying to get unmuted here. Yes, it does help. I tried Google Voice and I ran into some problems with it. And then after a certain time, it tells you unless you send a message or unless you use it, they will discontinue your number. And so I used it to send myself a message, and I guess that wasn't good enough because they discontinued it. And now I can't get back in because they ask you for your phone number and then they tell me, oh, you already have an account. And so I'm going in circles with Google Voice. So I'm gonna need some assistance with that too. And what were the other two options that you gave?
I talked about Flipgrid and I also talked about Remind.
Oh yes, I've worked with Remind. I'm not too crazy about Remind, probably because I know it's used in grammar school and high school, and students don't really use it the way they should, and so I shy away from Remind. Flipgrid I've never used, but you just mentioned that it was video, you videotape yourself etc. And to me, that translates as a lot of time watching other people's videos. And so it sort of takes up more time than other types of activities. So I don't know. I mean, I'm trying a lot of different ways of reaching students. And for example, today I told students that I would like for them to get a Facebook account if they don't have one, just for the course. Just, at the end of the semester, they could just delete their account or whatever, because I have uploaded years worth of materials there that, I expect them to use. And they just act like Facebook is so antiquated that they're not even going to bother getting an account. So, I'm struggling. And that was one of the reasons I signed up for this course.
Thank you for sharing. And Sharon, I see your clapping emoji. Sharon or Robin, do you have, I know you both are extremely experienced instructors. Do you have any tips or ideas for Sharon?
Oh, well, actually, I was just going to follow up with Sandra, and I appreciate all your presentation. I was just kind of curious, is there any like tool or program that students can record their voice and upload it without recording? I just thought that would be an interesting.
There is a program called VoiceThread. I'm not sure. I know it's a paid program, and I believe it has some free options as well. With Flipgrid, I always say you don't have to show your face. You could turn the camera around or do something else if you just wanted to do audio. And then there's also what I call, there's Otter, which is a transcription tool. We have a recording and a presentation on that as well. And I love to use that as like a pseudo kind of podcast tool, because it's meant to transcribe audio, but you will, say what you have to say, you speak whatever you're saying, and then it shows up in a transcript. But you can also get a link to share that, so people have the written transcript and they have the audio as well, and it's really super simple to share. So that could be a really great tool to say, make your Otter audio recording and paste it in, the discussion board or something.
How do you spell that? Otter?
Otter, like the animal, OTTER.
Oh, okay, the
Yeah.
animal. Okay,
Yes. And when I share the link, which I'm going to do in just a moment, you'll see you'll have access to the recording for that, so you can see how it works.
Great. So can I go next?
Sure.
Okay, so I really appreciate the kind of, telling us just be very systematic and thoughtful about our course design. Do you or someone in the online learning would, look at our course to kind of say, you're on the right track, or it seems good, because I know everyone has a different, unique take on how to present information.
Yeah, sure, of course. And that would be me. So
Okay.
if you want me to take a look at something, you can feel free to just send me an email and give me an idea of, what kind of feedback you're looking for. Because like you said, everybody has their own style. So if it's, if you're concerned about communication or feedback or organization, just let me know, and we can definitely take a look.
Mm-hmm. And I did notice in my own, PowerPoint instructor resources, they do have links to alternative text. So, one of your future workshops I plan to attend to kind of learn how to do it on my own. So thank you so much for that.
You're welcome. Yeah, we have trainings, again, that we have recordings of, and that we'll offer later this semester on how to create both accessible PowerPoints, and that includes doing alt text and accessibility features in all different tools in Microsoft 365. So there's some really great things built into Word and Excel and even Outlook that are great accessibility tools.
Well, I can add a few things. First of all, I think that Lauryn has been, in my opinion, a good mentor for me in terms of in the special education program. We revamped our courses to have, master shell courses, and so going through that process has forced me to be much more thoughtful and intentional. And so some of it now comes more natural, but yet there's other things that it's kind of like you don't know what you don't know still. And so things like this are very helpful. So I've used Flipgrid and have had good experience with it. I finally said, you have to kind of like get over yourself, because I remember taping a video and like, I don't like how I said that. I don't like how I look. And I thought, this is going to take forever. And then anymore, it's like, I don't really care, because it's more authentic and natural, and it just becomes fine. So I've used it in a couple ways. I've used it where I've given students the option to do a Flipgrid video instead of a discussion board writing. And so they had a choice there. I've also done it as where I have put out like a little bit of information that I want them to think about through the week, kind of like a mini lecture. And then if they have any questions, they can respond with a question. And then their peers can also answer the question if they get to it before I do. So that's been good as well. Another thing that I did for the first time this year, and you might think it seems time consuming, I really liked it, but mostly because the students loved it. So what I did was I actually gave them feedback on a paper by doing a little Zoom recording for them. So I, graded their project, and then I sent them a Zoom, and I told them all the great things about their project, and then I gave them constructive feedback. And what they really liked was, I think, number one, it was seeing me, right? That whole idea of engagement. And then number two is that oftentimes it's actually longer to write down thoughtful comments as opposed to just talking it out. So students really, really like that. And then the other thing that I think that, the great information you've given today that I want to say is when you were talking about flexibility, I like how you framed it as, and I should know this, but the light bulb went off, is, what are the barriers for students? And I think sometimes we're not sure what the barriers are until it comes up as a barrier. So, what might be actually nice somewhere along the way is to identify some of the barriers collectively, Lauryn, that, we are hearing. And then when we talk about these things, we let other faculty know these are barriers that we've encountered, but to really think about what those barriers are and then to respond to those. And I like that. So anyway, that's all for now.
Thank you, Robin. Those are such great points. And we did a little bit of that in, I did a DEI session for the DEI cert with equity and online education. And I did have the groups reflect. That was a much bigger group. And I had them reflect on like, what are some barriers you've seen for students? What are some issues you've seen arise for students? And we did have great conversation from that. And there were some administrators in that session that, I said, here, okay, we have, here are some issues we've seen. So I don't know where we are with that, but it's a great point, especially as the dynamics are changing, our student groups are changing, the issues that we saw 5 years ago or even pre-pandemic are not the issues we're seeing now. So it is great to stay on top of that. You also mentioned doing the Zoom recordings for students, which is awesome. And I do want to say there are a lot of different ways to do that. So the way you did that, totally fine. If that's what you're comfortable with, that's easy. With inline grading and Blackboard. So when you go into Blackboard and you can kind of mark up a paper, there is a way, it's a little bit hidden, but there is a way to add a video recording or audio recording right in there.
I think someone had told me that. And I never explored it. So I need to remember that. That would probably be easy. So, okay.
If you stay on, I will share the link in the chat so that it will be in the recording. I just need to get out of this presentation to do that. But But yeah, so, and, you could also, I've seen people use Flipgrid to do that, like anything where you can create a video, you can pop it in there. But you're right. It's, so you and Sandra bring up really good points, because Sandra kind of alluded to it, but didn't say it, but it's like very difficult to skim a video. Like it does take some time to watch videos rather than like reading a discussion board. If you're a visual person, like it's pretty easy for me to skim through a discussion board, but if I'm listening to somebody's video, even though you can speed it up, Sandra, you can make it 2 times as fast. It still takes some time, but I agree with you, Robin, that it's easier to like say your feedback rather than trying to like think it out and type it out. So it's just like interesting, the 2 sides of that,
Mhm.
All right. We have plenty of time to talk, but any other questions before I wrap up the presentation?
Yes, I have another question. I was wondering if you could talk about the users on Blackboard. I'm not too sure how to use it, but I imagine that students can talk to each other, write to each other, or whatever, on the user groups that are in Blackboard. And so I'm wondering how it works, and if anyone currently uses it that perhaps I can talk to about.
Sure. So kind of 2 things. So students don't necessarily see the users area. There is an option to see roster, but I don't even know if they see student email addresses with that. But we were kind of talking about as groups. And groups are actually really interesting, really handy. There are some people who are using it. The idea is specifically if you wanted to, let's say, do group work, and that could be assigned, like this is your group and you're handing in a project, or it could even be, some people do what they call like learning groups, and they just put people into like almost like a study group, right? And they don't have to produce any work together, but it's like, here's your little group of people that you can talk to if you need help. There are, and again, I can send you a link to this, Sandra, but you can either manually create these groups or have Blackboard randomly assign students to a group. And then students can access their kind of group page, and depending on what settings you choose, they have access to different Blackboard tools only for their group. So they have a discussion board area that's only their group mates, and you can see all of those as well. But just their group mates. They have a collaborate room that's just their group mates. They might have a wiki or a blog. Again, you can turn on or off all of these settings, but it gives them a place and different tools to use, and as well as email and messaging, right within their own little group of however many you've established.
Okay, and I've done that. As a matter of fact, in one of my courses right now, I made a group, and I gave them a discussion board, and basically I said, I want you to talk amongst yourselves, basically. And then, and then I logged out and whatever. No one goes in there to do anything. So how do you use that tool so that it'll be more active, or so that students, I don't know, are not required, but students want to go into those groups?
Yeah. Well, you kind of just hit the nail on the head. Students don't really do optional. So if you really want them to do something in there, assigning some kind of points or some kind of extrinsic value to it is going to be helpful, at least to get them in, maybe extra credit or something. And then again, if they use it as a study group, if they see some value to it, I think they'll do it. Also, and we can take a look, if you want to send me the course, you also have to, you should link to that area, or it can be difficult for students to access. So they may not have been able to find it or get to it, depending on how that was put in. And that it would not be a you error, that is a Blackboard issue that we just discovered. So I can show you kind of how to link to that to make sure students have easy access, and it's also easy for them to get there.
And yes, I think you hit the nail on the head. The students don't know how to get to it. They don't know it exists. I explained it to them and it just doesn't register. I didn't know that I can make links to it, so that's good to know. And sure, we could talk about this at another time.
Great. And you asked for people who are using that. So Wendy Aki in marketing is using that. She's been using it for years. They do like a set project with their group. And then Sonia Massey is using it. And I think she's just doing learning groups, which I believe are just study groups. I don't know. I don't think there's any points assigned to it or any group projects, but it's more of like a space for individuals to study together.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Joe, if you're with us, I don't know if you want to chime in on any other tools or things that you thought of.
I think that the contributions by all the attendees were great. And while you were talking about the inline grading process, I was looking to see if there was some specific BB help information that would speak to that exact, feedback mechanism inside of inline grading. But I don't see it there, so probably just demonstrating it's going to be better. But also know that both you and your students have the ability, because we're all part of the Echo 360 platform through your course, and using the text box editor, whether it's you using the text box editor or your students using it, they can actually do a recording with Echo 360 as well, and it'll be available to you if you're looking at it in their discussion board posts, or if you are providing that type of feedback mechanism to an assignment or an exam question, etc. That's all I was thinking of on this last topic.
Thanks, Joe. All right. Go ahead, Sharon. Do you have a question?
Oh, I was just gonna add another suggestion to Sandra, and I know Joe uses Padlet a lot, but Padlet might be like if you assign just a small group of students to different Padlet links, then it's kind of more visual and instead of just text. I don't know. It's just maybe a group activity to like create together. I don't know, something to consider.
That's a great suggestion, Sharon. Sandra, I know you've used wikis, I think, in the past, and Padlet is basically just like a more interactive Blackboard wiki. It looks a little bit nicer. It's a little easier to navigate, but that might be another great option.
I actually love Padlet as well for a variety of reasons, but when students have their own Padlet account, they only can have so many, right? I mean, there's only like 3 or 4 and then that's it. So like if different instructors were using it, they could easily use up their ability to use Padlet. Is that right?
Well, so with a free account, you can only have 3 or 4, but usually it would be an instructor who's setting up the Padlet and a student who's adding to it. So it wouldn't be an issue for the students, but it could be an issue for the instructors. So if you wanted to do it for all of your classes and you can only do 3 or 4, but maybe you have 6 sections, then it's a problem.
Okay, so basically, if you were given an assignment where students were creating their own Padlet, though, they are limited by doing that. But if the assignment has to do with building a Padlet that you perhaps initiate as an instructor, that's a different story. So, okay.
Correct.
Got it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And I'm often concerned. In fact, today, even I had students tell me that they are confused between using Blackboard and having to use the software that I use for their lab and practice activities. And that's only 2 places they have to go to. I'm always concerned if I add more, it'll be even more confusing if they have to go to Blackboard and Vista Higher Learning and Padlet and Remind and anything else. They're just going to give up.
Yeah, that is a real concern. And, part of that, clarity, consistency is being really deliberate with the tools that you use and providing really good instructions for them, and then embedding them wherever possible. So Padlet can be embedded right into Blackboard, so they don't have to leave Blackboard to go to Padlet. Same with Flipgrid. You can embed Flipgrid right in so that they don't have to go out. They will have to log in, but that would be with their Northampton email, but they don't have to go out to get there. And you know, we might be able to do the same with Vista too.
That's good, very good to know. Yeah, because I'm always concerned about them having to switch platforms, and that I'll take up with you in a different conversation then. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
I would be interested in knowing too, how you embed Padlet into Blackboard. So if there's some information on that that can be provided, that would be great.
Sure. Yeah, I will. I'll share all of that kind of in a follow-up email to all of you. So it won't be in the chat for this. So if you're listening to this recording, email Lauryn to get access to all those great things we talked about. But yeah, you know, we talked about a lot of really good things today, and that is pretty simple, Robin, but I can show you how to do that, and that'll work with anything that has an embed code. So kind of the same way you embed YouTube videos is the same way you would embed Padlet or Flipgrid. So it just shows up right in Blackboard. So here is, I'm going to just finish this up and then I'll be on after so we can keep chatting if there's more to chat about. Here are some resources that I used that I talked about. These links will be available in the presentation I'm about to send to you. We talked about questions. We'll do that in a moment, but this is the important part, and I need to have this in the recording. So this is your badge for attending the session. I am going to go ahead and copy in the link to the badge into the chat. I can get there.
I'm not quite sure what to do with that though.
Yeah, so give me one moment and I will kind of explain. Can somebody do me a favor and type in the chat? You can just say hello. Thanks, Robin. That didn't pop up for me.
That was
So
Sharon.
Oh, thanks, Sharon. All right, let me end the show. Okay, sorry about that. So here is a link to the badge for this presentation. So Badger is a platform that allows you to get and save badges or certificates or kind of little, we call gold stars where you attended this. So if you click on the link that I just put in the chat, or you can scan that, would have scanned that QR code that was up on the screen, it will ask you to put in your email address, and it will now be in your account. And you can collect badges the same way. We're going to do it the same way in every presentation, either scan the QR code or click on the link. And once you do that, let me start sharing again. Once you do that, you will see your badge. And like I said, you'll get a badge for every presentation. And the certificate course is built on these badges. So as you accrue these badges for attending, and as you accrue badges for doing the projects, those will lead to your certificate in the end. And so those are, we can track them. You can keep track of how many you have. So it's just a great way to kind of keep track of where you're at. Again, you don't have to get the certificate. You can just come to the trainings as one-offs and have these badges to show, but they're already counted towards that certificate.
Do I have to do that right now, or can I do that after the presentation?
You can do it after the presentation. You'll just want to make sure that you save the link. It'll be in the chat, so if you pull up the recording later, you can get to it, but you'll want to save the link at least so you can get back to it.
I just clicked on it. and put in my email address, did it like in 2 seconds. So it doesn't take long, and I don't do things very easily. So. But I
Yeah,
did
I'm
have
not
a
very
question.
good at multitasking either.
Yeah, I know
That's why
you
I
said you're
asked
on
about
your phone, Sandra. So yeah, it
Oh,
might be,
yeah.
yeah, it might be good for you to wait until later. If you need the link afterwards too, just when you email me, ask for it and I can send it to you.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, I'm also going to send you in the chat here a link to this presentation. And lastly, a link to the accessibility certificate, that course that I showed you that has all of the trainings listed there, all of the recordings. And thanks, Joe. Joe just sent me a great link about Padlet and how to integrate Padlet into Blackboard. So yes, please review those links when you get a chance. If you open up the presentation, you'll also have a link to all of this stuff. So I am going to go ahead and end the show, and I'm going to stop recording.
I sent a direct link to Sharon. That would be, I'm sorry, Sandra Del Cueto. Vista integration in Blackboard, Sandra?
Yeah, since I'm on the phone, it's hard for me. So you sent me a link for
I
what?
put it in the chat, but I can send it to you by email if it's better.
Oh, yeah, probably.
Okay.
And as soon as Lauren stops recording, I have a question for you, Joe.
Okay, hang on. Yeah, I thought I stopped. Okay.